Some places are abandoned for a reason. In Alaska, there's a cursed village where even the bravest soldiers disappeared without a trace. Tonight, we'll uncover the story of the mission that entered Port Chatham and never returned. Viewer discretion is advised. Subscribe now if you dare, because this story will haunt you long after it ends. July winds cut sharp through the jagged cliffs of Alaska's southern coast, where the Pacific slams endlessly into the rocks like a beast trying to claw its way onto land. This was not a place for people to thrive. The air itself carried a weight, a silence broken only by gulls and the occasional groan of the earth shifting under the strain of ice. And yet, hidden along this unforgiving coast, lay a settlement that no map marked anymore, a place most locals refused even to name aloud: Port Chatham. It was here, in the early 1940s, that a detachment of soldiers was quietly ordered. Their mission seemed simple on paper: secure the abandoned fishing village, investigate reports of strange disturbances, and prepare the land for possible military use. But what the brass did not write in their orders, what locals had whispered for decades, was that Port Chatham had been abandoned for reasons darker than storms or supply shortages. As the soldiers' transport boat approached, the first sight of the village set their nerves on edge. The houses, once simple wooden cabins, stood broken and hollow, like ribs jutting out from the earth. Nets rotted where they had been hung decades ago. Wooden canoes rested half buried in sand, waterlogged and split, as though the fishermen had simply walked away mid-haul and never returned. One soldier muttered under his breath, "It looks like everyone just left." Another, younger and cocky, chuckled to keep his fear buried. Maybe the fish ran out, maybe they just got bored of freezing. But their laughter didn't yet last. Tracks ran through the dirt of the empty main road, not fresh, not entirely old either. And they weren't the tracks of men. They were wide, long, too deep, pressed into the mud like something massive had moved across the land, not long before the soldiers arrived. The captain dismissed it. At first, bears, perhaps. Alaska was full of them, but one sergeant crouched down, comparing his boot to the print, and shook his head. "That's no bear," he whispered. The print stretched too far, the stride too long. A silence followed his words. A silence only broken by the restless crash of waves behind them. As the unit spread out to search the buildings, the sense of unease grew. Inside, cabins still held belongings: tin cups, cooking pots, a Bible left open on a table, pages damp and curling from decades of salt air. In one corner of a house, a fisherman's coat still hung, riddled with holes as though something had clawed straight through the fabric. The men exchanged looks but said nothing. The jokes stopped, the bravado drained away. They weren't alone. Every soldier felt it, though none dared admit it aloud. The sense of eyes pressing from the tree line, the sense of being weighed and measured, a chill hung in the air. Not just from Alaska's brutal winds, but from something unseen that seemed to settle in their bones. Night came fast in Port Chatham, the sun dropping like a curtain into the sea. They set up a small perimeter, fires burning low to keep away the cold. Radios crackled with bursts of static, and compasses spun weakly, refusing to hold direction. The captain ordered calm, insisting the men stay sharp and treat the mission as routine. Yet in the dark, even he avoided looking too long into the black wall of forest that rose just beyond the last cabin. Then came the sound. A howl, long, deep, not wolf, not bear, rose from the tree line and carried across the bay. It was unlike anything they had heard before. Some of the men froze, rifles clutched so tightly their knuckles whitened. Others swore under their breath, crossing themselves instinctively. The howl echoed again, closer this time, so deep it seemed to rattle their ribs. "Wolves," the captain barked, though his voice cracked ever so slightly. "Stay sharp." Wolves don't scare trained soldiers. But everyone knew. No wolf sounded like that. No wolf walked like a man. In the cold silence that followed, the men tried to sleep, each pretending they were braver than they felt. But in the corners of their dreams, the abandoned cabins whispered. The tracks in the mud lingered, and the unseen thing in the trees kept breathing, watching, waiting. Their mission had only just begun, but already the soldiers understood one truth: Port Chatham was not merely abandoned. It was cursed, and now the curse had them. The second morning in Port Chatham was no easier than the first night. Gray skies hung heavy overhead, and a fine drizzle misted down, coating everything in a wet chill that crept under uniforms. The soldiers gathered around their smoldering fire, their faces pale and sleepless. Some had managed to close their eyes for an hour or two, but most had lain awake, listening to that unearthly howl echoing from the forest. The captain tried to keep order, reading the day SIP's tasks from a damp notebook. We still split into two teams. One surveys the perimeter, the other searches for resources. We still regroup at noon. This place may be abandoned, but it's SIP's still U.S. ground now. Act like soldiers. His words sounded strong, but his eyes betrayed him. They were red, ringed with shadows. Even he hadn't slept. The men moved out, rifles slung tight against their shoulders. As they walked deeper into the village and toward the tree line, the unease only grew. Every house they entered told the same story: meals left unfinished on tables, tools rusting in corners, fishing gear abandoned mid-repair. It was as if the people of Port Chatham hadn't left willingly, but had fled in terror, never daring to return. One private picked up a child's doll from the floor of a cabin. Its porcelain face was cracked, its body chewed by rodents. He turned it over in his hand and whispered, "They left everything." Another soldier snapped at him to put it down, his voice too loud in the still air. They all froze after that, realizing how the sound seemed to stretch into the silence. Outside, the perimeter team followed the tracks they had seen the day before. Wide, unnatural impressions that pressed deep into the soil. The rain had blurred their edges, but the stride was unmistakable. Whatever had left them walked on two legs and stood far taller than a man. One sergeant crouched again, running his hand along the print. Not bear, not moose. This thing's different. His voice was low, as if speaking too loud might call it closer. The men exchanged glances, but none argued. By noon, when the teams regrouped, unease had hardened into fear. The captain demanded reports. But the findings only deepened the mystery. Every cabin abandoned midlife, supplies left to rot, tracks leading out of the village and vanishing into the trees. Nothing made sense. They ate in silence, chewing on hard rations under the drizzle. The fire hissed and smoked, but gave no warmth. Then, without warning, one of the privates dropped his tin of food, his eyes fixed on the tree line. "Sir, look." Something moved. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a shadow slipping between trees. But then it stepped into the open, just enough for them to see it. Tall, broad-shouldered, its skin dark against the mist. Its face remained hidden, but its outline was wrong. Too long in the arms, too thick in the chest. It stood watching them for no more than 3 seconds before melting back into the forest. The men erupted in shouts, rifles raised, safety catches clicking, but the captain barked them down. "Hold fire, you'll hit nothing but trees." His voice was steady, but inside he was shaking. Whatever they had just seen was no man. The rest of the afternoon passed in restless silence. The soldiers doubled the perimeter, weapons at the ready. Some swore under their breath. Others prayed quietly. They all knew what they had seen, but none dared speak the word aloud. Beast. When night fell again, the village seemed to shrink around them. Fires burned, rifles lay across laps, but no one truly rested. The forest pressed close, the trees whispering as the wind wound through them. Then, sometime deep in the night, the sound returned. Not a howl this time, a thud. Something heavy moved, just beyond the perimeter. Boots shifted, rifles clicked, eyes darted in every direction. Another thud, closer now. Something circled them, its weight pressing into the earth with every step. Then came the smell. Rot, damp fur, copper like blood. It drifted in on the mist and settled around their camp, choking them with its stench. One soldier gagged and covered his mouth. Another whispered, "It sits here." The captain stood, rifle in hand, trying to calm his men. But before he could speak, something crashed through the brush, just on the edge of the firelight. The soldiers fired instinctively, muzzle flashes blinding in the dark, shots echoing across the bay. The forest exploded with noise. branches snapping, earth shaking. Then silence. Smoke drifted from their rifles, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the stench of rot. Nothing lay in the firelight. No body, no blood, just trampled earth. Deep impressions pressed into the mud where something massive had stood. The soldiers looked at each other, pale and trembling. They had fired straight into the dark and hit nothing. The captain barked orders to hold the line, but doubt gnawed at him. Whatever stalked them in Port Chatham wasn't afraid of bullets. It wasn't afraid of men, and it was still out there, waiting. As dawn broke, gray light bleeding into the village, the men sat in silence, their faces haggard and hollow. Nobody spoke of what they had seen. Nobody admitted their fear, but every soldier knew the same truth. They were not alone in Port Chatham. And the thing that watched them, the third day in Port Chatham, began with a silence more dreadful than gunfire. The drizzle had stopped, but the air hung heavy, thick, as though the village itself was holding its breath. No gulls, no insects, no distant splash of fish in the bay, just quiet. The soldiers shuffled through breakfast, chewing hard rations like it was cardboard. Every movement was slow, every glance stolen over shoulders toward the trees. The fire smoked faintly, but none dared stoke it higher, as if brightness itself might draw the thing closer. The captain tried again to speak with authority. "We'll sweep the forest today, find tracks, find answers. Whatever's out there bleeds like anything else. We'll flush it out and finish this." His voice was steady, but his hand trembled on his rifle. The men didn't argue, but their silence was worse than rebellion. Their eyes said it all. They didn't believe him. By mid-morning, they moved into the woods. The village behind them looked small, almost swallowed by the mist rolling in from the water. They advanced in formation, rifles raised, boots sinking into moss and mud. Every twig that snapped underfoot made hearts jump. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The forest was ancient here. Trees twisted like claws, roots jutting from the earth like bones. Fungi clung to trunks, pale as skin in the shadows. The stench of rot thickened, clinging to their uniforms. "Smells like something sets dead out here," one muttered, his voice thin. Another snapped, "Shut it." They found more tracks, huge, bipedal, pressed deep into the earth. The stride was monstrous, far longer than any man's. But there was something worse. The prints weren't alone. Around them, scattered in the mud, lay impressions of human feet. Bare, small, dozens of them. The men stared in horror. Children's Sips footprints. "Jesus, what is this place?" one whispered. No one answered. As they pushed deeper, a sound broke the stillness. Water trickling. They followed it to a stream cutting through the forest. The water should have been clear, but it ran dark, stained red. One soldier crouched, dipping his canteen, then froze. "Sir." He lifted his hand from the stream. Red smeared his fingers, not mud, blood. Before they could react, a scream ripped through the trees. It was sharp, high, human, one of their own men. The squad spun, rifles raised, eyes wide. Another scream, ragged this time, choked off into silence. "Positions," the captain barked, but they were already scattering, crashing through undergrowth, chasing the sound. They found Private McAllister first, or what was left of him. His rifle lay twisted, his helmet crushed flat like tin. His body was dragged halfway into the undergrowth, his chest torn open, ribs snapped like kindling. His face was locked in a scream he never finished. The soldiers stood frozen, bile rising in their throats. One man vomited into the ferns. Another backed away, muttering prayers under his breath. "Eyes up," the captain shouted, forcing them back to order. But he too couldn't stop staring at the mangled corpse. The wound wasn't from claws, it wasn't from teeth. The rib cage looked peeled open, as if something enormous had split him apart with its bare hands. The forest erupted again, not with screams this time, but with a sound that froze them in place. A laugh, low, guttural, inhuman. It rolled through the trees like thunder, vibrating in their chests, shaking the very ground. One soldier clapped his hands over his ears. Another dropped to his knees, muttering. It sets playing with us. Dear God, it sets playing with us. The captain forced them to regroup, pulling the men into a tight circle. We're pulling back. Move. His voice cracked for the first time, but no one dared disobey. They carried McAllister's broken body only a few yards before dropping him. The weight too much, the stench unbearable. They stumbled back toward the village, rifles shaking in their hands, the forest alive with echoes. Footsteps followed them, slow, heavy, deliberate, always just out of sight. Branches broke, trees groaned. Something vast was moving with them, herding them like prey. When they finally burst from the tree line into the clearing of Port Chatham, the men were white as ghosts, eyes wide, hands trembling. They dropped to the ground, gasping, shaking. The captain didn't bother shouting this time. He just whispered, more to himself than to them. We set not hunting it, it sets hunting us. Night fell again, faster than before. The fire burned low, every man gripping his rifle like a lifeline. But sleep didn't come, because in the darkness, beyond the glow of the flames, shapes moved, not one, not two. Dozens, shadows watching from the trees. And then from the black came the sound of something heavy dragging across the ground. A wet, scraping noise that went on and on, circling the camp, like something dragging a body. None of them dared look, none dared move, but they all knew. Private McAllister hadn't stayed where they left him. Something had brought him back. The fourth night was the breaking point. The soldiers sat in a circle around the fire, rifles clenched so tight their knuckles were white. Nobody spoke, nobody ate. Their eyes darted from shadow to shadow, following the faint movements in the trees. The captain paced, muttering to himself, trying to convince his own mind that they weren't trapped, that this was still just another mission. But even he couldn't drown out the sound that scraped at their sanity. The dragging. It circled the camp again. Slow, deliberate, something heavy being hauled across the dirt and stones, its weight gouging trenches into the earth. Every man knew what it was. They knew whose body it was. Then silence. The dragging stopped. The night air grew thick, pressing down on their lungs, and from the edge of the firelight, a figure appeared. At first, it looked human, broad-shouldered, towering, covered in matted hair. Its head tilted unnaturally, eyes glinting in the firelight. But the longer they stared, the more wrong it became. Its arms hung too low, its chest was too wide, its legs bent in ways no man should. It stepped forward, and the stench hit them like a wall. Rot, musk, copper blood. Several soldiers gagged. One whispered, "Oh God." The thing bent down, dropping something from its grip. A body, McAllister. Or what remained. His chest was torn wider than before. His face mangled beyond recognition. His dog tags clinked as they hit the stones. The beast nudged the body toward the firelight with one massive hand, as if presenting its work. Then it straightened, towering above them, a grotesque grin splitting its dark, leathery face. The soldiers broke. Gunfire exploded, deafening in the night. Muzzle flashes lit the clearing, bullets tearing through the darkness. The beast staggered under the barrage, its body jerking, but it did not fall. Instead, it let out a roar so loud the fire itself seemed to tremble. It charged. Chaos erupted. Men screamed. Rifles clattered. Bodies collided in panic. The beast moved like a shadow given flesh, too fast, too powerful. It swatted a soldier aside with one arm, sending him crashing against a cabin wall so hard his spine snapped like twigs. Another soldier emptied his rifle point blank into its chest. The rounds tore into flesh, and the beast only snarled, its hand closing around the man's skull. One squeeze, and the soldier's head burst like fruit. Blood sprayed the fire. The captain roared, "Fall back! Fall back!" He shoved men toward the cabins, trying to create a line, any defense at all. The soldiers regrouped, firing in bursts, the night alive with smoke and screams. But the beast did not retreat. It weaved through the gunfire, unstoppable, laughing that guttural laugh as it tore men apart. One soldier was dragged screaming into the tree line, his cries echoing until they cut off with a sickening crunch. Another tried to climb onto a roof, only for the beast to snatch him by the leg and slam him into the ground again and again until he was nothing but pulp. For every bullet they fired, the beast gave back horror tenfold. At last, the captain hurled a flare into the night. The red light cut across the trees, and for the first time they saw its full form, a hulking nightmare, nearly 9 feet tall, its body covered in scars, its eyes glowing in unnatural amber. Its teeth were jagged, broken, stained black. Its skin wasn't fully fur, wasn't fully flesh. It seemed to shift, shimmer like something not meant to exist in their world. One soldier whispered, trembling, "That Sep's not an animal, that Sep's not even real." The beast roared again, the flare light gleaming off its teeth, and with that, the men broke completely. They scattered, some into cabins, some into the brush, every ounce of discipline gone. The captain tried to hold the line, tried to fire, but his men were gone, and the beast's shadow was already over him. It stopped just short, its massive chest heaving, that horrible grin still carved across its face. Then, almost mockingly, it turned and walked back into the trees. It could have killed them all, but it didn't set. It left. The silence that followed was worse than the attack. The surviving soldiers crouched in the ruins of their camp, shaking, weeping, staring at the blood pooling around the fire. The captain finally sank to his knees, whispering the truth none of them wanted to hear. "It's Set's not hunting us to kill us. It's Set's hunting us to break us." And in that moment, every man knew this was only the beginning. The survivors didn't speak for hours after the attack. They sat in the ruins of their camp, surrounded by the dead. The fire had burned low, flickering weakly against the black walls of the forest. Smoke clung to their clothes, mixing with the copper stench of blood. No one dared touch McAllister's mangled corpse, nor the others. They just stared at the shadows, flinching at every creak, every gust of wind. The captain broke the silence at last. His voice was hoarse, hollow. "We regroup, we dig in, we hold until rescue comes." But everyone knew the truth. Rescue wasn't coming. This wasn't even an official mission. They had been sent to erase whispers of Port Chatham, not survive it. Private Collins snapped first. He stood, his rifle clutched tight, eyes darting wildly between his comrades. "No, we can just sit here waiting. That thing, it let us live. Don't sit, you get it. It wants us alive. It sits playing with us. It sits calm back." His voice rose, ragged, desperate. "I won't sit be meat for that monster." Another soldier, Ramirez, shoved him back down. "Shut your mouth before you draw it here." Collins' dissed-off eyes narrowed. "Or maybe it sits you. Maybe one of you brought it here. Maybe it follows you." The men stared at each other, suspicion lighting in their bloodshot eyes. The captain barked, "Enough. It's the forest, it's the thing out there, not us." But even his command carried no weight now. Discipline had cracked. The beast hadn't just killed their brothers, it had infected their minds. By dawn, they had dug crude barricades around the camp with broken timbers and whatever they could scavenge. Traps were set, wire snares, sharpened stakes, trip flares. The work was frantic, messy, fueled by terror rather than strategy. Each man muttered to himself, flinching at every sound. That morning, they heard the first whispers. At first, it sounded like a voice carried on the wind, faint, childlike, words they couldn't make out. The men froze, straining to hear. Then it came again, a soft, sing-song tone, like a nursery rhyme. "Come and play." Private Ramirez dropped his shovel. His face went pale as chalk. That's my sister Set's voice." The others stared at him in horror. The voice called again, sweeter this time from the trees. Not just one, but many. Dozens of voices, children laughing, singing, whispering. Collins began to laugh, high and shrill. "You hear it too. Don sits, you see. It sits, not just a beast. It sits, the devil, the devil." He lifted his rifle, pointing it at Ramirez. "It sits, use any of us, any voice, to trick us." Ramirez shouted back, "Put that gun down before I..." A shot cracked. Ramirez stumbled backward, clutching his chest. Blood spread across his uniform. He gasped once, then collapsed in the mud. The camp erupted into chaos. Men screamed, rushing Collins, wrenching the rifle from his hands. He fought like a madman, spitting and clawing, shrieking that they were all infected, that the beast was inside them. It took 3 men to hold him down, beating him into silence. The captain stood over them, his face ashen. His men weren't soldiers anymore. They were prey tearing each other apart before the beast even touched them. That night, the voices returned. This time, they were clearer, louder. They came not from the forest, but from the edge of the firelight, just beyond the barricades. "Hungry," one whispered. "Come outside," another hissed. "Your brothers are waiting." The men covered their ears, rocking back and forth. Collins screamed into the dirt until his throat was raw. Then, movement. A shadow crawled along the barricade. Not fast, not violent, just a hand. Pale, human. Its fingers wrapped around the sharpened stakes, pulling itself forward. A face followed, sunken eyes, rotting skin, lips pulled back in a grin. It was Ramirez, or what was left of him. The men fired wildly, bullets tearing into the night. The figure collapsed, shredded, but when they rushed to the barricade, the body was gone. The mud was empty, no blood, no trace. The captain whispered, "It's Seps using the dead now." His voice cracked. "God help us, it's Seps using the dead." Sleep was impossible. Every flicker of flame cast shadows that looked like reaching arms. Every creak in the forest became footsteps. Some men prayed, others loaded and reloaded their rifles over and over just to keep their hands from shaking. By morning, they were half mad, and the beast was still out there, watching. By the 3rd night, the barricades were little more than rotting timber in desperation. The men inside them had become ghosts themselves, hollow-eyed, trembling, their uniforms stiff with dirt, sweat, and blood. No one trusted anyone anymore. Collins was tied to a post, gagged, rocking back and forth, muttering through clenched teeth. The captain had given the order after the shooting, but even he knew it was just a matter of time before discipline broke entirely. The monster didn't need to tear them apart, they were doing it themselves. The voices returned. That night, louder than before, circling the camp like wolves. This time, they weren't just whispers. They were screams. Mothers calling for sons, lovers pleading, children crying out in agony. Each man heard something different, but every voice was personal, sharp enough to cut through the mind. Private Jensen pressed his palms against his ears, tears streaking through his soot-stained cheeks. "It Sets, my boy," he choked. "He Sets calling for me. He Sets out there. He Sets out there." He bolted toward the barricade before anyone could stop him. "Jensen, don't shoot!" the captain roared. But it was too late. The soldier clambered over the stakes, stumbling into the dark. His silhouette vanished into the trees. A heartbeat later, the screams began. They were short, ragged, and cut off too quickly. The sound of bones snapping echoed across the clearing, then silence. The men didn't net move, didn't net breathe. They all knew Jensen wasn't sick coming back. By morning, there were fewer of them, and those who remained clung to their weapons like lifelines. The captain tried to rally them, pacing the camp, forcing himself to sound like the officer he once was. "We will make it out of here. We still push to the coast. There has to be a way. Stay sharp, stay together." His words died as one of the men pointed to the tree line. Something was standing there. At first, it looked like a man. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched. But the head was wrong, too long, too heavy. The arms dragged low, claws trailing in the dirt. Its eyes reflected the firelight, 2 burning coals fixed on them. No one breathed. The creature didn't move, didn't rush. It only stared, watching, studying, as though deciding who would be first. Then, it turned and vanished into the shadows. The silence afterward was worse than any attack. Hours later, the remaining soldiers debated in whispers. "It could have killed us. Why didn't it?" one muttered. "It sets waiting," another answered. "It sets starving us out like an animal hunting. It sets enjoying this." That realization broke something inside them. They abandoned the camp at first light, moving in a broken column through the mist-choked forest. The captain kept them moving, though their legs felt like lead and their minds frayed with every step. The deeper they pushed, the stranger the land became. Trees twisted unnaturally, their branches curling like claws. Carvings appeared on stones, crude faces with hollow eyes, ancient symbols etched into bark. They stumbled across a half-buried totem, its surface blackened as if burned, depicting a monstrous figure with jaws stretched unnaturally wide. "What the hell is this place?" whispered Ramirez. No one answered. By the second day of marching, they were down to a handful of rations. The forest had become a labyrinth. They circled the same stream twice, crossed the same ridge 3 times. The men realized the truth with dawning horror. The land itself was keeping them here. On the third night, the beast came again. Not with whispers, not with illusions, with claws. It tore into the column just before dawn, when the men were weakest. A scream ripped through the fog as Private Douglas was lifted off his feet and dragged into the dark. Gunfire cracked in every direction, flashes of light searing the mist. The soldiers fired blindly, the forest exploding with muzzle flashes, but the thing moved faster than their bullets. One by one, men were ripped apart, limbs torn, flesh shredded. The air filled with the smell of blood and the sound of crunching bones. The captain shouted, "Hold your ground, hold!" But the ground was already running red. In the chaos, Collins, still bound until moments before, slipped free. His eyes were wild, his mouth foaming. "You fools!" he shrieked. "It sits not hunting us. We sitber meant for it. We sitber the sacrifice." He bolted into the fog, laughing like a madman. The others never saw him again. By sunrise, only 5 men remained, 5 out of an entire squadron. They huddled together, trembling, covered in blood that wasn't their own. The captain stared into the mist, his face gray, his eyes sunken. He finally whispered the words no soldier ever expected to hear from his commanding officer. "We still not getting out of here, boys. Not all of us." The beast was still out there, watching, waiting, and it wasn't finished. By the time the sun clawed its way through the endless fog, the forest smelled of iron and smoke. 5 men remained, little more than shadows wearing torn uniforms. Their faces were hollow, lips cracked, eyes sunken into skulls. They no longer looked like soldiers, they looked like prey. The captain's voice was ragged, stripped of command. "We move to the coast," he rasped. No one argued. The men couldn't afford the luxury of doubt. They staggered through the twisted trees, boots dragging, rifles clutched in trembling hands. Every sound, the snap of a branch, the drip of water, the sigh of wind, made them flinch like beaten dogs. But the worst sound was silence. Because silence meant it was watching. By midday, they reached a ravine carved deep into the earth, its walls slick with moss. They had to climb down, one by one. The rope frayed under their weight. Private Ramirez slipped halfway and tumbled to the rocks below with a scream that echoed for miles. When they reached him, his skull was caved in, his body twisted like a broken doll. They didn't bury him. They couldn't. They left him there for the shadows. Now there were 4. The march grew slower. Hunger gnawed. Thirst scorched. But fear drove them forward. Fear of the thing that followed without ever stepping into view. Then, as night fell, the forest opened into a clearing. And there it was. An old village, or what remained of one, shattered huts, fire pits filled with ash, totem poles standing crooked, their carvings grotesque and worn by time. The place felt older than the war, older than the land itself. The men stumbled into the ruins, desperate for shelter. One hut still had walls. They collapsed inside, too exhausted to think, too broken to care. For a brief moment, the silence felt safe. But safe was a lie. Private Harris woke first to a scratching sound. His eyes darted to the wall where shadows moved though no fire burned. He nudged the captain. "Sir, something sets." The wall buckled inward, then split wide like paper. A claw, long and hooked, tore through the boards. Harris barely had time to scream before the beast yanked him into the night. Gunfire lit the clearing. The creature moved between the ruins with impossible speed, its eyes glowing like molten coals, its body too large to be real, yet somehow gliding through the trees. The captain screamed for the men to form a line, but the command was swallowed by the roar that shook the earth itself. One by one, the ruins collapsed. The monster didn't just kill, it demolished everything, tearing through wood and stone as though erasing the memory of what had once stood there. The survivors broke. They fled into the forest. Now there were three. The chase lasted until dawn. Their lungs burned, their legs barely carried them, yet the beast was always there, a shadow behind the trees, a hiss in the wind, a glow in the dark. It didn't strike. Not yet. It wanted them to run. It wanted them to suffer. By the time the men stumbled onto the coastline, the sky was gray and swollen with storm. Waves pounded jagged rocks. The captain collapsed onto the shore, crawling on hands and knees, salt spray stinging his face. "There," he whispered, pointing to a distant shape in the fog. A ship, small but real. Salvation. They waved, screamed, fired shots into the air. The vessel turned slowly toward the coast. That was when the water shifted. The sea bulged, rising unnaturally. The waves split. A massive shape glided beneath the surface, larger than any submarine, larger than any whale. The beast was not bound to the forest alone. It belonged to the land and the sea. The three men froze as a shadow the size of a building passed beneath them, blotting out the surf. The captain clutched his rifle but did not fire. His lips trembled as he whispered, "God help us." The waves slammed forward. The last private, Wilson, was pulled into the surf before the others could move. His screams were muffled, swallowed by the tide. A spray of red fanned across the rocks. Now there were two. The ship drew closer. Its horn blared once, twice. Hope flickered. The captain and the last survivor, Ramirez, clung to a rock outcrop, waving desperately. That was when the roar came. Not from the trees, not from the sea, from everywhere. The earth vibrated, the air itself shaking. The men clamped their hands over their ears, blood dripping from their noses. The sound wasn't just a roar, it was a command, a curse. From the fog rose a head, long, skeletal, teeth jagged like rusted blades. Its eyes burned white, not red now, as though alive with the fury of 1,000 dead. The beast was revealed in full for the first and last time. A nightmare made flesh, towering over the coast, its body a twisted fusion of man, beast, and shadow. The captain fired. One shot, then another, then his rifle clicked empty. The bullets vanished into the thing's flesh as though swallowed. Ramirez broke first. He screamed, dropped his weapon, and stumbled into the surf, hands raised as if in surrender. The beast lunged. Ramirez vanished in an explosion of water and bone. Now there was one. The captain fell to his knees, staring into the fog where the monster loomed. His mind was gone. His eyes were empty. He whispered words that no one could hear but the wind. Then he too vanished, whether by claw, by tide, or by madness. No one would ever know. When the ship reached shore hours later, they found nothing. No bodies, no weapons, no trace of the men who had sent their last frantic radio. Only the ruins of the village behind them, and claw marks carved deep into the rocks by the waterline.